What's all the waiting for?
We're doing a masterclass at the Equinox.
Alright, aye.
So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through your basic settings, telling you roughly what everything does so you understand what it does, and if you change a setting, how that affects the machine. Then I'll go on to explain more of the advanced settings, ground balancing, when and why you should do it and why you shouldn't do it, and then we'll go on to the more kind of quirky aspects of the Equinox with regards to iron, and determining what's iron, what to dig and what not to dig, and then it'll just be open questions, because I generally fix a lot of machines and fields with people touching the settings that they don't understand what they've done. Paul came to me there and he's got a very valid question which I've fixed many times in fields where people inadvertently notch out parts in the discrimination arc, and then they don't know how to actually put these back in, so they're wandering around the field with half the machine is discriminating all the good targets. So I mean, basically what we'll do is everybody initially we'll switch on the machine and then we'll all put our volumes down. So if you switch on your machine just now,
Should we factory reset it?
no, just whatever you've got just now, it doesn't really matter. And then pressing the cog wheel, you're going on to the third setting with the wee speaker, and you're just turning that volume right down so we can't hear it at all. So you can put it down to 0, like that. It's just so we're not actually interfering and we're not hearing it. So just go into the third setting, press the cog wheel 3 times, the wee speaker, and put it down to 0. That's your volume control. And I tend to always have that up full at 25, and then if I need the volume turned down I use the headphones, the Bluetooth headphones.
No, that's not volume. Keep going. That one, that's it.
After you've put it down to 0, just return into the detect screen by pressing your basically your target button here, and we'll run through everything. You want to come round there, Billy?
Aye.
Rather than me having to
Aye, that's true, aye, yeah.
do this. If I stand here, then everybody can see. Right, okay, so first of all, if we go back to the beginning, you've got noise cancel. Right, you should always noise cancel in a field. This is to eliminate EMI, and it will also eliminate interference from other manufacturers' machines and also other Equinoxes. And you should get into the habit of doing that fairly frequently, even in a machine, because it does quieten the Equinox down. It's a very sensitive piece of equipment, and so you know the less EMI you hear, the better, to be honest. To do that, you're pressing the accept and reject button, and you press that, and then you'll see the machine. It takes about 8 seconds to do that. That's your noise cancel. 8 seconds out of your detecting day, a dozen times during the day is not going to make any. Accept and reject there. So you put it onto noise cancel, which is the first one, and then you press the accept and reject, which is the tick and the cross button.
So the very first
Now there's various things. You can hold this up. What I tend to do is, if it's a machine that I'm interfering with, I'll tend to point the Equinox at it and do my accept and reject, so I'm definitely targeting that machine. Whether it makes any difference or not, I don't know, but that's what I do. I'll also point it at power lines or anything else and swing it about and swing it in the ground, just anything to get the EMI away. So your next setting, if you press the cog wheel again, is ground balance. Now this has had a lot of work done to it globally by the testers, and basically the 0 setting will do you for 90% of your detecting. If the field is mineralised up to 20%, you can just leave it at 0, it won't really affect it at all. But if you go on to the way to test, and I'll do it with my machine, don't everybody switch on the volume. Right, I'll put the volume back up so you can hear it, and I'll do my noise cancel again. And hopefully basically if you put it onto your ground balance and then you just pump it, I'm hardly getting any interference, you can't hear it, But see, if that's a heavily mineralised site, you'll get it go woo, 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 woo. And then what you're doing again is an auto ground balance. Again, the accept reject button. So when you're pumping it, you just press that, hold the accept and reject, pump your coil, and you can pump it quick, far, whatever it does to quieten it down. And when that humming goes away, that's you ground balanced. And you can see here it's ground balancing at 12, so it's not really essential to ground balance the machine at that.
Does it matter if there's anything underneath the coil at the time?
Yes, you make sure there's no iron or any other non-ferrous target, so you're looking for a clean bit of ground to do it. And essentially I see this scale as 100%, it's out of 100, so that coming up at 12 is telling me this ground is approximately, as a kind of working man's theory, it's 12% mineralised, so it's hardly mineralised at all, it's almost benign. I've been in some sites, especially Roman sites, where we've ground balanced and it's coming up at 78% mineralisation, so that's when you really do need to ground balance your Equinox. Because I feel it makes it more sensitive to good targets, but it also quietens it down, so you're not getting so much chatter and falsing off it, but only when the ground is extremely highly mineralised. I'll just go back on.
Derek, confirmation whether or not it's on the ground balance. If the icon's on, does that mean it's on?
Basically, if you ground balance it, right, if you go in there and that is reading anything apart from 0, then your machine is ground balanced.
You got the icon on the top right hand side.
Up here?
Yeah.
The tracking you're talking about, which is the little tracking icon. If you double press that, if everybody goes into the ground balance screen just now, so you're getting the little detector, which is the second notch, and then you don't need to ground balance. Everybody should be reading 0, and what you've got to remember about ground balancing is very important. If you ground balance in one particular field and you switch the machine off and you leave it for 7 days and you're out the next Sunday and you go into a field, that will still remember your ground balance from the last time. What you can do is do an auto ground balance, or you just manually just take it like that. It's the only way to do it, back down to 0, factory 0, and that's it. Now, what Paul was talking about, if you're on your ground balance machine, if you click accept and reject, you'll see a little kind of squiggly line coming up there, which is tracking.
Yeah.
Right, it just appears up your top right. Everybody see that? Yeah. Now, tracking essentially is to help you. It's like an automatic no-brainer. You don't need to ground balance it again in the field. Personally, I don't use it because if you get the Equinox and you go over a target multiple times, as you do when you're trying to determine whether you're digging it like that, if you watch the tracking, if you put it onto your ground balance screen and you get tracking on and do that, you'll see it shooting right up. It then takes a considerable amount of time before it lowers back down again. So it's basically tracked to the ground and tracked to the target. That's why I don't use tracking, because every 10-15 minutes I'll spend 5 seconds re-ground balancing. I'll just put it onto the ground balance screen, pump the ground, make sure it's still quiet. If it's still quiet, I don't need to ground balance again. And I just keep going. And it's only every 5 seconds. Whereas with the tracking, I personally, it's my personal opinion that you're never quite sure if that's working at its optimum performance, or whether it's tracked to a piece of highly mineralised ground or it's tracked to a target. So that's why I don't use tracking. So always make sure it's switched off, again just by pressing the accept and reject button. So then if we go into volume, it's dead easy, up and down. So you get maximum 25 and 0 is volume. I won't go into I'll go into the advanced settings just now. If you press the cogwheel, if you all do it, you'll get a wee line appearing under it, assuming you've got the 800. If you've got 600, I think you get the little line, but you can only alter the iron volume. Has anybody got a 600 here? Or are you all 800? All 800 is good. So you're in there, T1, assuming you're on 2-tone or you're on 50 tones, you'll get a choice of T1 and T2. You can change this by, again, the magical accept and reject button, the plus and minus, and that will change to T2. Now T2, because I'm on 2 tones, is your non-ferrous So I've got the volume of my non-ferrous just now at 25, and if I press the accept and reject button again, back into T1, you'll see I've got my iron volume at 1, because I just like to hear it. But if you want a quieter experience, you can put your iron volume to 0, and then I've felt you don't pick up as much ground noise, and you certainly, it cuts down in the amount of falsing you actually get. It makes it slightly more difficult to discern the trickier iron targets in the ground, like your larger iron or your circular iron or your iron with holes in it, because you're not actually hearing it. It'll null it. But I'll come on to threshold. But anyway, that's your volume control there for your non-ferrous and your ferrous signals. If I change it to 5 tones just now, and go back to it, you'll notice the volume here is T1. I'll actually stick my backlight on so you can actually see it. I've got T1, but then I've got T2, I've got T3, T4, T5. Now this allows you to set the volume, individual volumes for specific target zones. So you've got your first one going from 2 to 10, then you've got 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. If you're in a field and you're not really after the super high conductors that are coming in, and you can also get big bits of bronze and alloy, you can reduce that down so that it's not so in your face. Again, it's just to quieten the machine down. It's the same again, you could decide that from 2 to 10. Yeah, there's cut halves, cut quarters, and wee tiny bits of non-ferrous in the ground that will hear, but again you could reduce the volume down and then keep your maximum volume up at zone, I'll call it zone 2, which is 10 to 20 and 20 to 30, because that's where the majority of our targets are going to come. Your hammered coins, your milled coinage, and your other bits and bobs, they're all going to come in that range. So I generally, if I'm using 5 tones, keep them at the maximum volume and put the other 2 non-ferrous volumes lower so that I can still hear them, and then decide whether or not I want to dig them, but they're not in my face all the time. And then iron, again, you can have it at its lowest setting, or you can have it reading, say, volume level 1, so it's just in the background. That's on 5 tones. 2 tones, it's much simpler. You've got a choice of 2, and that's how you also make customized programs. So if we go into the next setting, it's threshold. Now it's not a true threshold, as in it helps build targets, etc, etc. It's I'm trying to remember what Minelab called it. I forget it just now, but a reference threshold. So in other words, it's a reference and it's providing a threshold which will still null over iron, right? But you won't necessarily, it doesn't act like a true threshold, so you can't actually build a target with it to get it coming through. I generally have a threshold on because I like hearing it, but also if I want to put, if the field has got a lot of iron in it and I don't want to be distracted with the iron, I'll reduce the iron volume to 0, but I'll turn my threshold up, because that helps me also discern iron as well when I'm passing over it. And if it's iron that's falsing, and the type of iron that you're digging that frustrates people, your circular iron, your horseshoes, your big bits of iron with holes in it, then the threshold helps you to discern that it's actually a big bit of iron that's in the ground, because it's nulling all the time. And I find it generally very useful to have a threshold. Not everybody does. If you want a quieter experience, like Sharon for instance, she doesn't run a threshold at all. She likes her machine quiet, and the hum in the background kind of annoys her. With this, the secondary feature on it, again, if you put a long press on the cog wheel, is your threshold pitch, and that's just generally preference, how high or low you want the threshold to sound in your ears. So it's up to you whether or not what you set it to there. And that's about all for threshold. Then we're into tones. So you can have one tone, which really, if you're a sadomasochist, you can go into one tone and dig absolutely every target you want, or you can choose gold mode. That's probably just as good. Or you've got what I would regard as the base one, which is two-tone, and I use two-tone all the time because I'm a very basic detectorist. There's nothing fancy about me. I dig holes in fields, and I'm not interested in deciding whether or not that's a ring pull or could it be a bit of silver. I'll dig it anyway. It's going to take me 10 seconds to dig it, so I'm going to dig the hole. So I tend to stick with the basic two-tones, but you do have a choice if you want slightly more. In Victorian trash fields, two-tones can be a wee bit frustrating because there's a target. You might do an arc of a swing and you might get 5, 6, 7 targets in that one arc. So 5 tones, if you put it onto 5 tones and then you adjust the volumes, and you can also adjust the tone breaks in that, which we'll come on to, then it can make it a much better experience in a very busy site. With your when you're on actually the tones, if you do the long press there, you're then into your tone breaks. Now all this is doing is adjusting the target zones that you want to hear. So in essence, I could turn that all the way up there. If I'm actually doing it right, and down. So I can choose. Wait a minute. That's actually, no, sorry, that's actually, is that my volumes? That's my volumes, sorry. So my individual volumes there, so I can put them up and down in that secondary function screen there. And again, the accept reject button changes it actually between T1, T2, T3, T4 and T5, assuming you're on 5 tone. This is where the tone breaks. This is what I was actually wanting to get onto. This is your accept and reject screen here, which will come up as -9 as standard. That's just a reference figure. Pay no real heed to it until you actually want to alter it. If you do a long press on that here, this is where your tone breaks come in. With again the accept and reject here is changing it. So that's them set as standard. If you can see it here, so you T1, T2, T3 is saying 20. Now I can reduce T3 down, and you'll see the little, if you go onto it just now actually, if you all go onto your kind of accept and reject screen.
Standing here for some reason.
I don't know what tones you've set, but it doesn't really matter. And then whatever tone you're in, if you use the plus and minus, you'll see the little black bar changing at the top. Now that's reducing that target zone. So in essence, T3, which I had there, which was getting from 10 to 20, I've now got T3 going from 10 to 12. So I've narrowed it right down. Now that's a tone break. If I change into T4, you'll see T4 goes from 13 now all the way up to 30, and I could reduce that down as well, so I could have a very narrow band there. So in essence what I've then got is I've got T1 on 2, I've got T2 going from 2 to 10, then I've got T3 going from 10 to 12, and then I've got T4 going from 13 to 15, and then the last one you cannot adjust, but that would basically be going from 16 all the way up to 40. It's just another way of customizing your machine if you were really wanting to coin shoot or hone into specific targets. That's an extreme example I've given you. I'm not advising anybody to use it as extreme as that, but it is there if you want it. And it's also, you might have seen recently with the updates that people are saying they're hearing coke because some guys are changing the tone break T1 and they're actually putting that down to 0 or they're putting it to 1. You will then hear coke because the majority of coke in the UK comes in at TID number 1 and number 2. So if you adjust tone break T1 away from the factory set standard, which is 2, you will start to hear coke. If you put it to 1, level 1, you will hear certain pieces of coke depending on the saturation level of them and the size of them. If you put it to 0, then you'll hear a lot more coke, and personally I don't like to hear coke, so I tend to leave mine at the factory 2 so that it's not bothering me at all, and then I'll alter the other tone breaks as and when I want. Now Paul gave me a question earlier, which was to do with the accept and reject screen. He was wondering if he is notched out. If you go over a target and you inadvertently press that accept and reject button, the tick in the cross, you will notch out that number on your discrimination arc. And I've had some guys come up to me in the field and it looks like the toothless hag, if you know what I mean, with the discrimination arc, because it's had about 10 notches taken out of it, because for some reason they're pressing the accept and reject when they get a good target. Then for the rest of the day they've notched that good target out, so they're walking about and then they'll come up to me in the field and say, well, how do I get rid of this on the screen? The answer's easy. You go into the accept and reject screen, which is here, as you can see, and then if you look, if I'm using the plus button there, you can see that number going from -9, it's going all the way up. Now what that is that's just a reference telling you where the cursor is on the discrimination arc. So now I'm on to 2 here, and if I go on to 3, that's not notched out just now, but if I then press the accept and reject, I can notch that out. I'll now zoom away up to 10, I'll press another, I'll notch it out, I'll put it up to 16, and I'm there. You can see I'm starting to resemble the kind of toothless hag, and that's the way that some people's discrimination arcs are looking. It's like that. And what they've done is they've actually notched out those numbers, so they've notched out potentially good targets. The easy way to put it back, you just look at your flashing cursor when you're moving it and you're getting down, and it'll flash on the bit where there's the missing tooth. Just press accept and reject, and hey, dentistry at its finest, it fills it back in. Right, so again, we're just down to the next one. Accept and reject, fills it back in. Down to that one, accept and reject, fills it back in. I'll go back down to the last one I did, 3, fills it back in. And there I can put the reference back down to -9 now, and that's my discrimination arc all sorted. It's very simple. It's an easy thing to do, but it's also quite easy to notch out by accident if you press accept and reject when you go over a decent target. But that's how you fix it. That's how you fix it. Accept and reject screen, move the cursor and then use the accept and reject button to notch it in and back out again, back in again. Simple as that. The final setting that we actually have now is recovery speed. There's a lot to be said about recovery speed. It's if you know, 9 is incredibly 8 sorry is incredibly fast, and 1 is incredibly slow. So this is all about target separation. So that's a good target beside say a piece of ferrous iron. If you've got it on level 1, it will still separate that target, but you will have to swing, as Neil Jones says, you know, slow and low. And I mean, Neil, if you've ever seen Neil working, he is remarkably patient and slow with his swing. I mean, it's that kind of speed he's doing, and he gets the targets, but you need endless amounts of patience to do that. But if you're gridding an area, then you know you can drop the recovery speed to 1. You'll get the maximum depth that the machine will go, but you will have to adjust your swing speed to compensate for that. Because if I was to run around a field swinging at my normal pace like that, or even going faster, then I'll be missing a lot of targets, because the target separation, if it goes over a bit of iron, it'll take, you know, a couple of seconds before it will be ready to detect again. So if there's non-ferrous beside that iron, I'm going over the iron quick, then it won't have recovered in time to get that non-ferrous target, so I'll be missing it, and I'll think the machine, the field is dead quiet. I'll be saying, oh, there's nothing in this field, you know. Whereas if you then turn it up to recovery 6, which is the standard, that's about the best balance, where it's getting you decent depth, but it's also allowing great target recovery. So, you know, anything within a couple of inches, 2 to 3 inches of a bit of iron, assuming that the bit of iron is not massive and overwhelming, say a cut half, then you will pick it up on recovery speed 5, 6 or even 7. I only go into recovery speed 7 and 8 when the ground is highly mineralised, and I will have ground balance. So see if I'm having to ground balance a machine and it's really highly mineralised, that you're talking about over 40-50% mineralisation in the ground, then I'll probably jump up to recovery speed 7. And the reason I do that is I see mineralisation. If you imagine iron filings spread all over the field, it's like a net. You know, they're not in every bit of ground, but they're across the net across it. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see in between the holes of the net to get decent targets that's in there, because I'll get my maximum depth there because I'm not seeing the mineralised ground. So the higher the recovery speed, the better. But it also doesn't mean that you put it up to recovery speed 7 and then you're walking about like that, because you're defeating yourself. You know, you can put the recovery speed up, but maintain your discipline and just your normal speed when you're walking, and that will help get the targets in mineralised soil. 8 is extreme, but again, don't speed up. Just because its recovery speed gets faster doesn't mean you get faster. In actual fact, it works quite conversely. You can actually get slower and get more targets because the machine's going faster, but if you go slightly slower, then you're giving the machine even more of a chance of seeing in those holes in the mineralisation and getting decent targets. Now with recovery speed, if we do a long press of the cog, you'll go onto the what is now infamous or famous iron bias. Now the iron bias is just a noise filter, and you could liken, I think iron bias, at its highest noise filter 9 is approximately the same as the noise filters on a CTX. So that's why, you know, CTXs can appear very stable and quiet compared to an Equinox. It's not that the CTX is less sensitive than the Equinox, because it's not, but it does have more factory preset noise filters to make the experience a little bit quieter and more stable. The Equinox is a raw brute of a machine, and you know, at iron bias 0, you know, you're getting the full power of that machine without any noise filters going into the ground. But this can be a little bit overwhelming for people, so that's why we always advise initially, until you get used to the machine, to set it somewhere in the middle, which is roughly 4. Because what that's doing is giving you the best chance of identifying any bits of iron which are odd shaped, circular, have holes in them as well. You know, you'll be able to identify them better with your iron bias set at 4. You'll lose a tiny bit of depth, it's fractional, it's nothing to worry about. And the more experience you get, then the more you can drop your iron bias down to, I generally use it at 2, but I can use it at 0, because what you've got to remember is we used the Equinox for, I don't know, 9 months without any iron bias. You know, there was none. Iron bias hadn't been put onto the machine, so you know, we were using it without it, and it is perfectly usable without it. You will dig more iron the lower this goes, so if you run it on 0, you will dig more iron. You will get iron falsing if there's 2 small iron targets next to each other. You'll get that kind of halo effect where it will see it as a circular target, and so you'll get a positive response in the machine. It's just one of these things. The more experience you get, the more you'll actually start to hear and recognise iron. I'll dig very little iron in a day, as will Sharon, but occasionally a bit will fool us, or occasionally we'll dig a bit because there's something about the tone beside it that we want to investigate it. It's only one more hole in a field and it's a bit of iron. I'm not saying I'm some kind of genius that I don't. Iron's metal. I metal detect, so of course I'm going to hear it, and on occasion I'm going to dig it. And no machine is infallible about iron. So I mean, that's essentially the basic kind of settings with the advanced settings and what they do. You've then got obviously your modes here. I think it was Willie come up to me in the field last week saying that the problem, the Equinox was going mental and he couldn't understand it, was detecting coke and everything else. What he'd actually done was inadvertently pressed this button when he was coming out of the settings, twice, and it actually changed the mode from field 1, and he'd actually moved it into beach 1. Right, so that's why his machine wasn't behaving the same as it was, and that's always the first thing to check is user error. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory term, because I do it on occasion, especially in the pissing rain in the mud, but you can barely see your screen, you're just pressing buttons, and occasionally you'll move it off your mode. So always check that, just check you've not put your sensitivity either right down, because Jim Foster was another guy who came up and said to me, this machine's crap, it won't even detect a hammy and I'm half a centimetre from it, and basically inadvertently turned his sensitivity down to level 1. So of course, so I showed him my genius and put it up to level 22, and he was astounded. I now think he's super glued all the buttons so he can't actually move them, but he's found a lot of stuff with it. So the things to check is you haven't changed mode by accident, you haven't reduced your sensitivity down. If you're hearing a lot of iron, you might have taken the discrimination off, the factory discrimination, by pressing the horseshoe, which basically takes out iron and ground noise. It will take out ground noise as well, so that will quieten the machine down if you want the machine in a quieter experience. That's what the horseshoe does. Your sensitivity obviously works direct from the detect screen, plus and minus, so you can reduce it right down, your sensitivity, or you can turn it all the way up, and you can hear them interfering with you as I'm putting it right up. Your sensitivity is great, and it depends what detecting experience you want. I've ran this machine as low, it was on the black sand in Hawaii, I've ran it down as low as 12 or 13 I think it was, simply because the machine was struggling in the black sand, which is magnetic sand on the beach. So I turned it right down, and I was still getting remarkable depth out of it on the black sand. You know, I was still getting 6-7 inches, and that's super highly mineralised ground, probably one of the worst detecting environments you could go in. So on our fields, you know, I would have no hesitation if I wanted to have a quieter experience, understanding that I'm losing some depth, of running the machine at 15-16 sensitivity. I'll still get the targets within the first 6 to 8 inches. So if you're on, you know, ploughed soil, ploughed and rolled, and you're going fast across it, then you can reduce your sensitivity, and it will find the targets 6 to 8 inches if you want a quieter experience. If you want to run it hot, like some of the more extreme users do, the most extreme tester would be Neil Jones, and he runs his machine all the time at 25. I can run it at 25 as well, it doesn't bother me. But I've got a year under my belt, or a year plus, of using this machine, so I know what it's like. As a beginner, I would say your kind of maximum sensitivity you want to put it to is 22, because that's enough not to bombard you until you get used to the machine. But you could also have it at the factory 20, or even below that if it's too chatty at 18. And 18 will still get you. It will still get you 9-10 inches on decent, as long as the ground is not highly mineralised. If it's fairly benign or under 20% mineralisation, you will get the depth down at 18 sensitivity as you would on 22. The more mineralised your ground, then you need to start altering the settings like I said to you earlier. You need to do your ground balance, and you need to up your recovery speed and up your sensitivity. So that's there. Accept and reject. Do not touch it unless you want to notch out targets. I showed you earlier. That's all it does, apart from being a user button when you're in the settings. So that's what you're wanting. Your frequency shift here just changes from your multi, and it will cycle through 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 and go back to multi. So again, sometimes if your machine is not behaving the way it is, take 2 minutes to look at the settings and your screen, because you can inadvertently touch that frequency button and change it. I've seen myself detect for, you know, I don't know, half an hour in 5 kilohertz where the field suddenly got very quiet, and I just thought I'd hit a quiet patch in the field, but I hadn't realised I'd actually touched the frequency button and I was detecting in 5 kilohertz. So basically the lower the kilohertz, you're looking for larger targets in the ground, such as forge. You're going to struggle to get a cut half, cut quarter, or a small piece of gold if you're at 5 kilohertz, unless it's virtually on the surface. Basically 5 kilohertz will see deeper, and it will see larger targets deeper, going all the way up into to your 15 is your sweet spot, your T2s, your XPDSs and things like that, assuming you're not changing the frequency in those that can have selectable frequencies. 15 tends to be the sweet spot. I think it was the T2 or the G2, round about those kind of machines that brought that out. That is your kind of sweet spot for silver, round about that, 15, 18 kilohertz. So you can put it on that again, it'll quieten it down if you're on a particularly sparky field. Put it on to single frequency. If you're getting a lot of heavy EMI from really bad power lines, or you're at a rally where there's 300 equinoxes around you, then you can drop down to a single frequency until they all dissipate across the fields, and that will quieten the machine down, and it will still give you the sweet spot for getting your hammered silver, etc. 20 is you're starting to get more into your higher frequencies, 20 and 40, so that they're going to get more sensitive to gold. So if you were specifically looking for gold targets, then you could use the 20 and 40, and you would have more of a chance. But I just generally run it on multi-frequency most of the time. So that's your basic settings. Now, with your iron, every machine is going to hear iron. It's just one of these things, and every machine is going to struggle to discriminate all iron out. There's not been a machine brought to market yet which actually does discriminate all iron, because it's just impossible. The kind of iron that falls with the Equinox is large pieces of iron, and these will either be irregular or regular shaped. Regular shaped pieces of iron, so rectangular, square, circular pieces of iron, can false and give you good positive numbers. Circular iron with a hole in it, such as a kind of carrot ring shaped bit of iron, or a bit of iron that is circular and flat, will false. Any bit of iron with a hole in it, believe it or not, will false and give you a positive target as well. Any bit of iron that is half a circle, like a horseshoe, which in the ground has then had this kind of halo effect, will false as well. You will dig some of these occasionally. The way to get round it, Gordon Heritage came up with the idea of you can use the user profile button, which I haven't told you about, to do a mirrored copy of the settings that you're on, and then drop the frequency down. I'll show any of you that want to do that afterwards. And then you can just switch on, or you can use the frequency button here, switch on to 5 or even 10 kilohertz, doesn't really matter, and cross the target, and you'll see the numbers, they tend to jump up by 10. So if you're getting a good target, it's 15, 16, and you're thinking, but there's something about the tone, you're thinking, that's too banging for this field or whatever else, could be a bit of iron, drop it into 5 or 10 kilohertz and give it a swing, see if it jumps up to 24, 25, 26 on the TID numbers. It'll be iron, walk away every single time. I can guarantee you I've dug thousands of bits of iron with this machine, and it'll be iron. And that's why Gordon Heritage also came up with that solution to it. The other thing I tend to do is the quick check is I'll do that and I'll just cross it. A lot of iron falsing will go, you'll be a good target that way. As soon as you cross it that way, it'll go onto a pure iron sound, or it will null out if you've got your iron volume at 0 or your discrimination on. It'll just null out, walk away from it, it'll be iron every time. Another way is, and this gets more of your circular iron, is when you're on the centre of the target, you can even pinpoint to get the centre of the target. Take the pinpoint off, you're getting your good tone, just move the coil away. See if you move the coil away from it and it's only moving a centimetre or an inch, and the good tone disappears, it'll be iron. Because if that's a good non-ferrous signal, the good tone will stay all the way up till it's just in front of the front edge of the coil. Dig it. Then, and you just get into the habit of doing that. You'll see me in the field, I'll be detecting, I'll do that, and then I'll wiggle away, and I can make as quick as that, and I go up iron, I'm off again, or you'll see me put the spade in the ground. There are a couple of other nuances with iron, but they're the basic ones for discerning iron, and they work. You will dig 1 or 2 bits in a session, but generally they will get most of the iron, including all the tricky bits of iron that are fooling all the new users to the Equinox. So I'll round that up just now, because I know there's fields there and I can hear the shouts of gold and hammer echoing around the field. But anybody get any questions about the Equinox, I'll be happy to have Sharon.
No, none.
Just half an hour.
Give you half an hour.
Any questions at all, any problems, or you know, if you want to quiet the machine, you can also come to me in the field, and you're not bothering me. You know, I come in these digs, I get a bit of detecting in, but I'm here to benefit the club and to benefit the members.
You're very good to us, Derek, and we all appreciate it.
Why was it programmed from -9 to 40 rather than up to 100?
It was basically, I suppose, that what you have to remember is this is a mid-level cheap machine. You know, Minelab are a manufacturer that will produce a higher end machine. Right now the Equinox is the Equinox is the daddy of the mid-range machines, and the CTX, in my opinion, is still the daddy of the high-end machines because of everything it can do, and it is simply still outstanding on pasture. So essentially this is very much like a kind of Xterra type arc, and there's actually 2 reference points in every sector here, so you're actually getting, I think, 80 rather than the 40 in it, but they chose to do that simply to get it into a screen that's going, you're actually going to understand it. If they bring out another version of the Equinox or a higher end version, you'll probably find it will have a better target identification display than this, but this is a mid-level machine. Let's not forget this. I know we're all finding wonderful stuff with it, but this is a sub £900 machine, and if you get the 600, then it's sub 650, I think, which is remarkable for what it is. You know, it's light, it's waterproof, it's Bluetooth, it's wireless. You know, so you can't have everything. And you know, as having worked in manufacturing, I can understand that they will give you what you need. And let's make no bones about it. This is a raw machine. It's got raw power, raw sensitivity, and to go with that, you've also got the fairly rudimental TID display, because they want you to dig targets. Half the reason why people are finding more with the Equinox is because they're looking and they're going, nah, ring pull moving away. But the Equinox are going, it could be a ring pull, might be a bit of silver, I'm digging that. So it's forcing people. What I've always done with metal detecting and made wonderful finds is I just dig. It's one more hole in a field, and the Equinox forces you to do that. So you find more. Your targets find rate increases. Any other questions?
No.
Thank you all. Sorry for boring you, and
Thank you, Derek.
just approach me in the field if you need anything one-to-one. Okay.
Hammy's for everyone in this group.
Thank you. Cheers.